Viking Warriors of North Iceland. Chapter 1. The winter wind roared across the northern fjords of Iceland, carrying the bitter scent of snow, ice, and the dark waters below. Jagged cliffs rose from the fjord like ancient guardians, their peaks shrouded in clouds that glimmered faintly with the last rays of the weak winter sun. On those cliffs, the Nordfjordur clan had gathered, their shields glinting in the pale light, their axes gripped tightly, every face set with determination. They were the defenders of the north, keepers of the fjords, and they knew that today the peace of their lands would be tested. Far below, the waves splashed against the hulls of longships approaching the shore. The Solheimar clan, a rival group from the southern volcanic plains, crested the waves, their banners snapping in the wind. Years of simmering tension had reached a boiling point. The southern warriors intended to claim a foothold in the north, to impose their will upon the fjords, and the Nordfjordur would not let it happen without resistance. The air seemed alive with anticipation. Sigurdur, chieftain of the Nordfjordur, watched his warriors with a keen eye. They were strong, trained in the ways of the north, and guided by generations of knowledge. Yet even he felt a shiver of unease as he scanned the distant longships. Rumors whispered among his people that the Solheimar had formed secret alliances, and some claimed they had the favor of dark forces, spirits of old, lurking behind their ranks. The northern defenders did not fear the elements. They were hardened by snow and ice. But the unknown always carried a weight of tension heavier than steel. When the southern ships touched the icy beach, a shout rose from the cliffs. Axes met shields in a flurry of movement. The clash was violent, but it was not the blood and gore that would define this battle. It was the relentless struggle, the cunning, and the courage of men and women willing to defend their home. Snow and wind whipped across the cliffs, tangling hair and freezing breath, masking the sounds of the clash, but sharpening every sense. Elves, invisible to most, darted between the trees, and the spirits of ancestors whispered encouragement from the mist, their presence guiding and fortifying the Nordfjordur warriors. Jorund, a young southern Viking, found himself separated from his group amid the chaos. The storm of battle roared around him, the sounds of metal striking metal ringing against the rocks, the cries of warriors mingling with the howl of the wind. He realized he had to survive, for not just himself, but for the warnings he could carry to his people. The northern warriors were cunning, taking advantage of every ridge and dip in the terrain, their movements precise and coordinated. Jorun's own clan had underestimated the harshness of the land and the unyielding spirit of the north. With every ounce of strength, he ran toward the fjord. The icy water crashed against the rocks as he plunged in, his body almost numbed by the cold. Yet the drive to live, to see another day, carried him across the waves. Behind him, the cliffs rose like silent sentinels, and the fires from the longhouses burned bright against the grey winter sky, smoke curling upward in a signal of the northern clan's triumph. The northern warriors cheered, not with glee over bloodshed, but with relief and determination. They had defended their lands and the honor of their people. Exhausted and shivering, Jorund finally pulled himself onto the snowy rocks across the fjord. He looked back at the scene, taking in the scale of the battle. the courage of his adversaries, and the whispers of unseen forces that had aided them. Though he was only one man, he carried knowledge that could protect others. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the fjord in twilight, the story of the Viking warriors of North Iceland was just beginning. The fjords would not forget this day, nor would the winds cease to carry tales of courage, cunning, and the quiet magic that watched over the land. Chapter 2. The aftermath of the first clash left the Nordfjordur clan alert and restless. Snow continued to fall in steady flakes, blanketing the fjord in a quiet white that contrasted sharply with the chaos from the previous day. The northern warriors moved through the forests and along the cliffs, checking every ridge, every frozen stream, ensuring that no southern Viking had slipped through unnoticed. Sigurdur stood at the cliff's edge, the wind tugging at his cloak, and surveyed the fjord with a careful eye. The southern invaders had retreated, but he knew better than to believe the war was over. The northern scouts returned one by one, breathless from their patrols. "They've regrouped," one said, his voice tight with tension. "Several longships linger near the southern coves. They're planning something." Sigurdur's jaw tightened. The Solheimar clan was cunning, and they were desperate. Desperation often made people reckless and dangerous. In the forests, the elves moved unseen. Their presence was subtle but undeniable. A rustle of branches where no wind blew, a faint shimmer of light among the trees, whispers carried by the snow-laden air. The spirits of ancestors lingered too, unseen, their wisdom guiding the northern warriors, warning of traps and alerting them to movements along the cliffs. Some young warriors claimed to hear their names called in the wind, their courage bolstered by voices that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Jorund, who had survived the icy fjord crossing, was now pressed against the northern snowbanks, hidden from view. His heart pounded not from exertion, but from fear and determination. He knew that if he could warn the southern warriors in time, lives could be saved. Yet every movement he made was watched by keen eyes. The northern scouts and spirits were vigilant, and the fjord's cliffs made every step perilous. The northern warriors gathered for a council of strategy. Sigurdur outlined a plan that would protect the fjords while keeping casualties low. Fires would be lit in controlled areas to block the southern approach, and signals sent along the cliffs would coordinate the defenders' movements. Every warrior, young and old, was assigned a post, whether on the cliffs, in the forests, or along the frozen streams. The elves and spirits, invisible to most, would continue to watch and assist silently. The southern invaders, unaware that their presence had been observed, began moving under the cover of a snowstorm. They had planned a night assault, hoping to catch the Nordfjordur clan off guard. But the northern warriors were ready. As the snow fell in heavy drifts, torches flared to life along the cliffs, casting long shadows across the frozen fjord. The northern scouts had positioned themselves carefully, and when the southern forces reached the first ridge, they found themselves confronted by a wall of determined faces, axes ready, shields braced. The clash was fierce but not cruel. Blows were exchanged, but the northern warriors focused on strategy, herding the southern invaders toward natural traps, narrow passes, icy streams, and snow-laden slopes. Here, the northern advantage was clear. The terrain was their ally. The southern warriors struggled to maintain their footing and formation, while whispers of unseen elves and spirits seemed to chill them further. Every misstep was met with a warning shout, or a gentle but firm push from the defenders, guiding the southern forces away from key positions. Meanwhile, Jorund moved through the forest, careful to avoid detection. He had seen the northern strategies in motion and realized that his people could be completely cut off if he did not reach them with a warning. Crossing frozen streams and scaling snow-covered rocks, he pressed on, his determination unbroken despite the biting cold and the threat of discovery. Every step was perilous, but the survival instinct drove him forward. By dawn, the battle had shifted. The southern forces, exhausted and bewildered by the coordinated northern defense, began a cautious retreat. Fires from the longhouses, lit strategically by Sigurdur's warriors, sent smoke curling into the winter sky as a signal of the North's control over the fjord. The snow-covered landscape was quiet once more, save for the occasional rustle in the forests, the elves and spirits moving unseen, ensuring that no southern warrior had survived to launch another surprise attack. Jorund, cold and weary, finally spotted a safe path to return to his companions. He knew he would have to travel far to relay the northern strategies he had witnessed, but he also carried the knowledge of what to avoid. The fjord, once a frozen battlefield, now lay silent under the watchful eyes of the northern warriors, whose vigilance would not waver even as night fell. As the sun rose, painting the icy cliffs with a faint golden glow, the Nordfjordur clan held the fjord. They had survived the southern incursion, defended their land, and strengthened their bonds with the mystical forces that watched over them. Yet, deep in the forests and across the fjord, the southern warriors were regrouping. The battle was not yet over, and the northern warriors knew that what came next could decide the fate of the fjords for generations. Chapter 3. The wind howled like a restless spirit over the northern fjords, carrying with it the scent of snow, sea, and distant fires. The Nordfjordur clan had fortified their positions along the cliffs, their watch never ceasing, even as the night deepened. Sigurdur strode along the icy ridges, the crunch of snow under his boots mingling with the whispering of the elves hidden among the pines. Every shadow seemed alive, every gust of wind carrying the echo of something ancient. The northern warriors were patient, knowing that the Solheimar would strike again, perhaps more cunningly this time. Down along the fjord, the southern clan moved quietly, their longships hidden in coves, their presence masked by the swirling snow. They were determined, relentless, and underestimating. The northern defenders had cost them dearly before. The southern warriors whispered among themselves about magic and spirits guiding the north, shaking their heads at their failures. Jorund, now warmed by a small fire and surrounded by trusted companions, recounted the northern defenses, his voice low but urgent. He urged his people to strike before the north could further fortify their positions. The elves, delicate yet vigilant, drifted unseen through the forests and over the cliffs. Their whispers, audible only to those attuned to the land, carried warnings and subtle guidance. Sigurdur listened, feeling the weight of their counsel in the pit of his stomach. The northern warriors were not alone. they were bound to the land, to the spirits, and to the ancestors who had defended these fjords for centuries. By mid-morning, a snowstorm began to rise, thick and heavy, reducing visibility to mere paces. The Solheimar moved forward, hoping the storm would provide cover. But the Nordfjordur warriors had anticipated this. Fires were lit on the cliffs, smoke rising through the flurries, giving the illusion of chaos but concealing precise positions. From their vantage points, Sigurdur and his lieutenants signaled movements, directing the warriors along hidden paths, around crags, and across frozen streams. When the southern warriors finally emerged from the storm, they found themselves surrounded by the land itself. Steep inclines blocked their retreat. Icy streams forced them into narrow corridors, and every footfall echoed in the silence like a warning. The northern warriors met them with swift and decisive actions, guiding them away from critical points without unnecessary harm. Each strike, each maneuver was deliberate. The Nordfjordur were masters of strategy, honed by generations living in the harsh northern climate. Jorund, witnessing the northern precision, realized that brute force alone would not win this battle. He had to understand their ways, anticipate their movements, and use the fjord's natural elements to his advantage. Moving along a narrow ridge, he signaled to his companions, coordinating small flanking movements that could provide openings. Every choice carried immense risk, but survival demanded courage and cunning. Amid the clash, a mystical presence became palpable. The elves and ancestral spirits moved subtly, nudging warriors out of harm's way, amplifying the sense of connection to the land. Jorund could feel it, an invisible force that guided him, whispered warnings, and sometimes offered glimpses of what lay beyond the cliffs and fjords. Though he could not see them, he sensed the spirits watching, judging, and occasionally aiding. Hours passed. The southern warriors, fatigued and bewildered by the combination of northern skill and elemental obstacles, began to retreat once more. Fires on the cliffs acted as signals, guiding the remaining northern forces to strategic points where escape routes could be monitored. The fjord's waters, dark and icy, reflected the smoke and torches, creating illusions that amplified the sense of power wielded by the defenders. By dusk, the fjord lay in a tense calm. The Solheimar had withdrawn, licking their wounds and reconsidering their strategy. The Nordfjordur clan, weary but unbroken, gathered at their longhouses. Fires warmed their bodies and spirits, and the elves whispered their silent approval. Sigurdur addressed his people, reminding them that vigilance was eternal. The land had been defended, but the war for control of the northern fjords was far from over. Jorund, exhausted yet resolute, prepared to relay the northern tactics to his own people. He understood that knowledge might yet turn the tide in future encounters, but for now, the northern warriors had proven their might and unity. The fjords, silent under the falling snow, seemed to exhale with relief, as though the land itself had survived another test. And high above, the peaks of the cliffs pierced the clouds, guarding the northern warriors, their icy presence a constant reminder of the strength required to live in these frozen lands. Chapter 4. The nights grew longer and the wind sharper as winter tightened its grip over the fjords. Snow had begun to pile high along the cliffs, turning every slope into a treacherous path, and every forest into a maze of white and shadow. The Nordfjordur clan moved with care, aware that the southern intruders were still lurking, still scheming. Every snapping branch and gust of wind could be a warning or a trap. Sigurdur convened his warriors at the longhouse, perched on the northern cliffs. Their faces, lit by the flickering fire, showed determination, but also fatigue. The elves' whispers, almost imperceptible, seemed to echo in the icy air. They guided the warriors' movements, nudging them to notice subtle signs. Footprints partially covered by snow, smoke from distant fires, the glint of a weapon under a low-hanging branch. Every signal mattered. Meanwhile, the rival southern clan had not given up. Huddled in a secluded cove along the southern coast, they planned their next move with a mixture of desperation and cunning. Jorund, their lone scout and messenger, now knew the northern defences intimately. He could describe the fire signals, the hidden ridges, and the cliffs where every misstep could be fatal. It was a precarious plan, and one misjudgment could doom them. The southern warriors moved in small groups, attempting to navigate the snowy terrain without detection. Each step was careful, measured, but the land itself seemed to resist them. Snowdrifts hid pits, and icy streams threatened to throw them off balance. Jorund, leading one of the groups, felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Every decision he made could protect, or endanger, his comrades. As dawn broke, the northern scouts spotted movement along the southern approaches. Sigurdur's warriors readied themselves, not with haste or fury, but with precision and calm. They used the cliffs and forests to their advantage, forming silent lines, covering one another, and guiding the southern forces away from vulnerable points. The elves, invisible to the eyes of men, flitted along the tree branches and cliffs, their presence felt in the subtle shifts of wind and the occasional soft whisper. The southern warriors pushed forward, unaware that their paths had been anticipated. They struggled through deep snow, losing pace and cohesion. Jorund directed small maneuvers, trying to buy time and maintain order. From the cliffs above, Sigurdur watched, recognizing familiar patterns from Jorund's movements. Every northern warrior knew their position. Every southern move was observed, recorded, and counted. Hours of careful maneuvering passed. The southern warriors, weary from travel and battle, finally reached the edge of the fjord. The icy waters stretched below them, a formidable barrier. Jorund knew he could not continue with the others. He had to make a desperate choice. One by one, the southern warriors took cautious steps back, retreating toward their hidden cove. But Jorund, driven by a sense of duty, leapt into the freezing water. The fjord's icy embrace was shocking, yet Jorund pressed on, swimming across the frozen expanse with every ounce of strength. Waves crashed against him, and snow whipped his face, but he kept moving. Far above, the northern scouts and elves watched silently, unable to intervene but sensing his resolve. Across the water, he spotted the northern longhouses and knew he had to send the warning. Finally reaching the opposite shore, Jorund collapsed, shivering and exhausted. He had made it. The fjord had tested him, and the elements themselves had challenged his endurance. But his determination had triumphed. As he lay hidden in the snow, he signaled with smoke and reflective shards, sending subtle warnings to his companions further inland. The northern warriors, attuned to the environment and its silent messages, noticed the signal immediately. By mid-afternoon, the northern defenders prepared for the southern assault with renewed vigilance. They had survived the first clash, and anticipated the next. The fjord, the cliffs, and the forests all aligned with them, nature itself a quiet ally. The elves, invisible but ever-present, seemed to hum through the air, guiding every movement, lending confidence and clarity to the northern warriors. Jorund, though cold and nearly spent, took a moment to watch the fjord he had crossed. He knew that his actions had made a difference, that the northern warriors were prepared for the next confrontation. Yet, in the distance, the southern warriors regrouped, aware that their plans had been uncovered. A final confrontation loomed, inevitable and tense, and the winter fjord would witness its outcome. Chapter 5. Morning broke over the fjords like a pale silver ribbon, casting light across the snow-laden cliffs and frozen waters. The northern warriors, guided by Sigurdur and the unseen elves, were already in position. The air was crisp and electric, carrying the scent of pine, frost, and the faint tang of the sea. Every footstep, every whispered command, carried weight. Today would decide the fate of the northern settlements. From across the fjord, the southern warriors approached cautiously, aware that their previous attempts had been thwarted. Their longships, hidden under snow and rocks, remained in the cove, ready for a sudden retreat if the battle turned against them. Jorund, now recovered enough to move, had made his way back to guide them. But he was painfully aware of the advantage held by the northern warriors. Every step they took was shadowed by observation and careful planning. The first clash was subtle. Shouts echoed across the cliffs, the soft thud of boots in snow, and the ringing of axes against shields. The northern warriors, expertly positioned along higher ground, moved with purpose and precision. Snow and ice provided natural barriers, funneling the southern warriors into paths that limited their numbers. The elves whispered warnings from the trees and cliffs, guiding movements and subtly shifting the outcome in the North's favor. Jorund and his companions pressed on, trying to gain footing, but the northern strategy was unyielding. Every attempt to flank or surprise the defenders was anticipated. Every maneuver met with careful resistance. Sigurdur's leadership was steady, calm, and unshakable. Even as the southern warriors stumbled through hidden ice patches or deep snow, the northern warriors held firm, using their knowledge of the terrain to maintain control. The battle continued through the morning, snow flurries whipping around the combatants, muffling sounds, and turning the fjord into a white battlefield. The southern warriors, exhausted from previous clashes and the arduous winter terrain, began to falter. Jorund, realizing the danger, called for retreat, but many were trapped between cliffs and ice-laden streams. Every decision was critical. Every moment counted. As the southern warriors made their last stand near a frozen stream, one young fighter slipped into the icy water, sending tremors of panic through the remaining group. The northern warriors did not strike recklessly. They did not need to. The land itself acted as an ally, guiding the defenders' movements and slowing their attackers. Smoke from distant fires, positioned deliberately, created illusions of greater numbers, causing hesitation and confusion among the southern forces. Jorund knew there was only one chance to warn his remaining allies. Gathering the last of his strength, he plunged into the cold waters of the fjord once again. The freezing current pulled at him, the wind cutting through his soaked clothing. but he pressed on, driven by duty and the hope of survival. Across the fjord, the northern warriors, unaware of his identity, watched as the movement in ice-laden waters hinted at an approaching figure. By midday, the southern warriors were in full retreat. The northern warriors pursued cautiously, ensuring no one was left behind. Snow and ice concealed tracks, and the elves guided paths through hidden ridges, allowing northern reinforcements to position themselves advantageously. The southern warriors, now weary and demoralized, began to see that the fjord itself had turned against them. Finally, the last southern fighter emerged from the water, shivering and exhausted. The northern warriors, seeing the retreat, ceased pursuit and regrouped. The fjord was silent once more, save for the wind and the soft crunch of snow under cautious footsteps. Sigurdur gathered his people, commending them for their vigilance, their unity, and their endurance. The land had been defended, the fjords remained in northern hands, and the balance of power had been restored. Jorund, on the opposite shore, watched from a distance. He had survived, but he knew the cost of ambition, miscalculation, and the harshness of winter. The elves, whispering approval and encouragement, reminded the northern warriors that respect for the land and vigilance were their greatest allies. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the fjord, the northern warriors felt a deep connection to their home, to the land, and to the spirits that had guided them. The fjords, quiet now under the soft snowfall, had witnessed courage, strategy, and resilience. And high above, the icy cliffs stood as silent guardians, a reminder of the strength and endurance required to survive in these northern lands. Chapter 6. Winter had begun to ease, though the fjords remained capped in snow and ice. The air carried the scent of melting frost, of pine, and of the sea retreating gently from the shoreline. For the northern warriors, life slowly returned to its rhythm, tempered by the knowledge of what had been endured. The fjord had been defended, and the clans of North Iceland could breathe, even as they honored the sacrifices made to secure that safety. Sigurdur gathered his people at the longhouse, overlooking the fjord. The warriors, their faces etched with fatigue and relief, listened as he spoke, not of victory in battle alone, but of unity, of respect for the land, and of the lessons learned in hardship. "We have survived," he said, his voice steady and calm, "because we moved together, because we honored our home, and because we remembered that courage is stronger than fear." The elves, whose presence had guided and whispered warnings, faded into the forest and cliffs, leaving only traces of their subtle influence. Some of the younger warriors swore they could still hear faint laughter in the wind, a reminder that magic lingered in the fjords, watching over those who lived in harmony with the land. Jorund, who had risked everything to warn the northern warriors, was welcomed with cautious respect. Though he had fought on the opposing side, his bravery and determination had saved lives. Sigurdur nodded toward him during the council, acknowledging that courage transcends alliances. Jorund, shivering but proud, felt a sense of belonging he had never known. The frost of the fjord had tested him, but it had also purified the intent behind his actions. In the following days, the northern warriors repaired what had been damaged, cleared snow-blocked paths, and reinforced the settlements along the fjord. Children played cautiously among the ridges and ice, their laughter a reminder that life continued. Smoke curled gently from the longhouses, and the sound of hammers against wood mingled with the soft rustle of the winter wind. It was a time of recovery, but also of quiet celebration. As evening fell, Sigurdur climbed the cliffs above the fjord, overlooking the waters that had been the stage for their trials. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. He watched the fjord's icy surface sparkle, reflecting the last light of day, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The fjord had witnessed their courage, and it would remember them, etched forever in the whispers of wind, the shimmer of snow, and the quiet strength of stone. The northern warriors gathered on the cliffs beside him, gazing out at the fjord. There were no boasts, no songs of vengeance. Instead, there was peace, a recognition that true strength lies not in conquest, but in vigilance, resilience, and respect for the world around them. The southern clan, having retreated, would carry stories of the northern vigilance, of the elves' whispers, and of the fjord that refused to yield. Night fell fully over the fjord. Stars glittered in the clear sky, and the northern lights danced faintly, ribbons of green and violet above the mountains. Sigurdur and his people remained on the cliffs a while longer, drinking in the silence and the beauty, knowing that their legacy would live not only in memory, but in every tree, every snowdrift, and every whispering wind across North Iceland. And in the quietest moment, when the world seemed still, a single thought lingered in every warrior's heart: courage and unity endure, even when the storms are fiercest. And the fjord, patient and eternal, would always stand as witness to the bravery of those who called it home.